Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayhon, and welcome back to another Dungeons & Dragons character concept. I had this video prepared before I had any ideas for future videos. Not until recently I didn't have any viewer requests. But after I got this video completed, I got 2 requests for builds in. So next week there are going to be some viewer requests. Next week I have another character concept that goes off of a viewer request before I do the actual viewer request. And then the week after that, I have a wonderful viewer request that comes in 2 different parts. So keep an eye out for those. Anyway, today is another episode of Character Concept. At the beginning of this month, I did Star Wars base builds. And that was in celebration of National Star Wars Day, but also a celebration for the announcement that the Spelljammer setting is coming to 5th edition. If you do not know what Spelljammer is, I would recommend checking out other channels that explain the setting. But in short, it's Dungeons & Dragons in space. The Spelljammer setting actually comes from the name of the main vehicle of the setting, the Spelljammer, which is a ship that travels through space, powered by magic. More specifically, the spell slots from a spellcaster that mans the helm. Which is really cool. I love the concept, even though I don't know the setting at all. The best I got is the name of the ship and mind flayers. That's it. I am still technically new to Dungeons & Dragons, even though I have been doing these videos for, 2 years now? 3 years? I can't remember. But anyway, the Giff, not to be confused with Giff, another character concept that I did last year, are more or less just anthropomorphic hippos. So their other name is Hippofolk, which is what I'm going to be referring to them from now on. That way I do not confuse any of you when I pronounce their name. Because Giff with 2 F's and Gith with a TH kinda sound similar when I say them. So, Hippofolk. In character concept, I take a look at the different races within Dungeons & Dragons and give you some examples of characters that you could play as based off of the lore of those races. And with the Hippofolk, which has recently been released for Unearthed Arcana, based off of the Spelljammer setting that will be released later this year, I decided to do them in preparation for that release. And the Hippofolk are actually pretty interesting. They do not like magic. We'll go ahead and get that one out of the way. The reason why they do not like magic is actually pretty interesting, is because whenever they interact with magic, including magic items, it goes wild. Think, Sips from the Dingo Doodles channel. But, whenever they interact with anything magical, if they try to cast a spell, if they try to use a magic item, it goes wild. they fear wild magic. They fear technically any type of magic because of their interactions with it making it go wild. Which you'll probably think, well, that's kind of contradictory because they need to be able to pilot their spelljammers. And to that I say they actually have a solution for that. They just have somebody else man the helm. That isn't a Giff. Speaking of, Giff, or Hippofolk, are loyal to their race. When you see one Hippofolk, you're going to see a lot of Hippofolk. They travel together. Kind of like a big old herd, which actually a group of hippos is known as a bloat. B-L-O-A-T. Bloat. Which is hilarious. Anyway, what backgrounds and classes would best fit the Hippofolk? Well, the backgrounds that I've been able to come up with are soldier, marine, far traveler, sailor, shipwright, pirate, smuggler, and mercenary veteran. The Hippofolk actually have a very militaresque background. A society that is very military-esque. So that's why some of these backgrounds are in this list. They're also mercenaries for hire, and honestly, I think that building a Hippofolk that is a poacher actually fits as well with their lore. These are actually some NPCs I had designed for my own campaign. Hippofolk that are poachers. It's hilarious. I loved it. So I'm going to be running that. So there's that idea. For classes, Artificer, Barbarian, Fighter, and Rogue would be the most common type of classes that you would probably see among the Hippofolk. Now, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into classes for the Hippofolk. Now, we're going to start off with Artificer. Now, if you've seen my video covering Artificers and Psionics, you probably already know that Artificers still cast magic. It just looks like non-magic to an outside viewer. So you'll probably be typing in the comments section, Drayhan, why are you putting Artificers on this list of classes that the Hippofolk can use when you just said previously that they do not like using magic because it goes wild? And to that I say yes and no. Like I stated in my video covering the Artificer and the Scion, I did mention that a lot of dungeon masters could rule that the Artificer's magic isn't actually magic, but just seems like magic. Which is how I perceived it when it was first released in the Eberron setting. Because that's how it was written in that book. It wasn't actually magic, even though it was built like magic. But once Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, it was said to be magic, even though it didn't look like magic. So there's that. Also, in the lore, according to the older books, once I think it was, who was it? Ilmunster or Mordenkainen. Either way, one of those two wizards had visited the Hippofolk in their travels. And after that, a lot of Hippofolk did start using magic. A couple of wizards, a couple of clerics, and so on. So it would stand to reason artificers would work in that aspect. So with that being said, for artificer specialists, the best ones I can think of, at least for a lower magical means, would be the artillerist, the armorer, battlesmith, and master maker. Master maker, by the way, comes from Dread Mortal, one of the two books that Keith Baker, the writer of the Eberron book, created. Moving on to Barbarian. This would actually be one of the most common. This and Fighter would be the more common of the four classes that I mentioned at the beginning. And that is because, well, hippos. Primal pass for your Barbarian character that is a Hippofolk would probably be the Battle Rager, Beast, Berserker, Totem Warrior, Wild Magic, and Juggernaut. Now, I think Wild Magic Barbarians are interesting. I myself wouldn't use them that often, but I think they would be interesting for a Giff, or Hippofolk. At least one or two would probably be a Wild Magic Barbarian. Moving on to Bard. Like I said, they don't really like magic, but after that one wizard, Ilmeinster or Mordenkainen, had visited them, they did start using more magic. So I would say Bard with the colleges of Swords, Valor, and Maestro. And the reason why I put Bard on this list is because, much like with the Hobgoblins, the drummer boy stereotype would probably work in the regards of the Hippofolk because of their militaresque build. Moving on to Fighter, the second most common character type you would probably make for your Hippofolk, we have the following martial archetypes: the Battlemaster, the Banneret, Brute, which is Unearthed Arcana, Gunslinger, Renegade, Scout, another Unearthed Arcana, and the final Unearthed Arcana, Sharpshooter. Now, Gunslinger and Renegade would be the more common subclass that a fighter hippo would take, because, according to their lore, they love their guns and gunpowder. Honestly, that's the one thing they count as a currency, is gunpowder. You give them gunpowder, they will give you just about anything, even their services. So, yeah, that is something to consider. Now, if you're looking for a more beefed up NPC, I would recommend using Scouts, Sharpshooters, and Brutes, or at least some of the features from those subclasses, to beef up your stat blocks for the Hippofolk. Next is Monk, and this one I actually had a snag on. I added this before I had added Bard, and it is because the snag is at 6th level you get key empowered strikes, which are magical. The key effects in itself have been ruled by Jeremy Crawford to be non-magical, so it wouldn't be affected by this curse that the Hippofolk supposedly have when it comes to magic. But the key empowered strikes would be affected. But seeing as these new Hippofolk don't have that curse, I think it might be safe to have a Monk Hippofolk. For monastic traditions, I would say Astral Sylph, Drunken Master, Kinsey, and Living Weapon would be your best picks for a Hippo Monk. Moving on to Ranger. This was actually the one spellcaster that is said to be common among Giff. Hippofolk. For your Ranger conclaves, I would say Hunter, Monster Slayer, and Horizon Walker. Though I do not recommend using as many spells. Again, since the Hippofolk don't like magic. Rogue is going to be the last martial class we go over. And for archetypes, I would say Assassin, Inquisitive, Mastermind, Scout, and Swashbuckler. Now, if I didn't put this on in the video, but for a cleric, it is said that a lot of Hippofolk do take up worshipping the war gods of whoever they are working with. So that's to be considered. A war domain cleric, Hippofolk. Now, the last one we're going to go over today is the Sorcerer class. And the only origin we're going to need is wild magic. Once again, because of the weird curse they seem to have. I'm not sure if they're going to continue to have this weird curse in the newest Spelljammer books. But if they do, then I would recommend the Wild Magic Sorcerer. And with that, that is all I have for you today. This was actually a rather quick video because of how few subclasses I had to go over. I will see you next week when we take another look at a character concept based off of one of my viewer requests. So until next time, this has been Drahon, and I am offline.